Let's talk about one of the most incredible transformations in the history of art. We're going to dive into how France, a country literally tearing itself apart, somehow managed to create one of the most elegant, structured, and influential styles of theater that the world has ever seen. This is the story of how perfect order was born directly out of total chaos.
So that's really the big question here, isn't it? How on earth does a society drowning in civil war suddenly pivot to creating this incredibly refined, rule-based art form? To figure that out, we've got to go back and really understand what that chaos looked like.
So here's our starting point: France in complete chaos. You can't really appreciate the obsession with order that's coming unless you first see the messy, anything-goes world that it was a reaction to.
Okay, so picture France in the 1500s. It is an absolute mess. The country is just being ripped to shreds by these brutal religious wars between Catholics and Protestants. And the theater scene? Just as disorganized. It was mostly a hangover from the Middle Ages, crude comedies, sprawling plays that went on forever. And the whole thing was controlled by these old guilds like the Confrérie de la Passion, who had a death grip on the few proper theaters in Paris. There were no rules, no real structure, just chaos.
And right in the middle of all this, you've got this guy, Alexandre Hardy. He's a really important figure because he's basically France's first professional playwright. This guy was a machine. He wrote hundreds of plays. But he was a man of his time. The new rules that were on the horizon, he completely ignored them. Violence on stage? Sure. Multiple plots? Why not? He made playwriting a job, but he didn't bring order. That had to come from somewhere else entirely. So if order wasn't going to bubble up from within, where was it going to come from? Well, the French monarchy, as it started getting its act together, looked south for inspiration. They looked to Italy. And this push for change came straight from the top. You had Catherine de' Medici, the Italian-born queen who brought her love for these huge, fancy Italian court shows to France. And then a bit later, you get the man himself, Cardinal Richelieu. He was one of the most powerful people in the country, and he made it his personal mission to whip French art into shape. For him, a great, orderly nation had to have great, orderly art, and Italy was the gold standard.
Richelieu didn't just hope for order, he built a machine to enforce it. He urged, and I'm using air quotes here, a group of intellectuals to create an official academy. By 1637, the king made it official, and the Académie Française was born. Its whole job was to be the guardian of the French language and arts, to set the rules. And what's wild is, this institution is still around today.
So, what were these shiny new rules everyone had to follow? Well, the movement was called Neoclassicism, and it was all about reason and logic. Plays had to follow the famous three unities. The plot had to be about one main action, it had to happen in one single location, and it all had to take place within 24 hours. Then there was decorum. Characters had to act their social station. Kings act like kings, servants act like servants. And finally, verisimilitude. It had to be believable. No ghosts, no magic, nothing that couldn't happen in real life.
Okay, so you've got the rule book. But rules are nothing without great players who can actually make them sing. And this era produced three absolute giants who would define what this new theater could be.
And here they are, the titans of the age. First, Pierre Corneille, kind of the pioneer who had to publicly fight with the new rules. Then you have Jean Racine, the perfectionist, the guy who absolutely mastered the form. And finally, the brilliant Molière, a comedic genius who used the rules to make fun of the very society that enforced them.
The big showdown for this whole movement happened in 1637. Corneille writes a play called The Cid, and the public goes absolutely wild for it. It was a smash hit. But the critics and the brand new Academy, they were horrified. It broke all the rules. It had too much action. It mixed tragedy and comedy. It was a mess by their standards. The Academy officially condemned it. It was this huge cultural battle, and in the end, the rules won. Corneille got the message and, to his credit, went on to become an absolute master of the form. Now, if Corneille had to be forced to follow the rules, Jean Racine embraced them. He perfected them. His plays, like Phaedra, are these incredible pressure cookers of psychological tension. By squeezing everything into 24 hours, he just puts his characters through the ringer until they completely fall apart. He was also known to be ruthless. The Paris theater scene was intense, and he once famously poached Molière's star actress right before premiere. Ouch.
And that brings us to Molière, the master of comedy.
He was brilliant because he used the rigid structure of neoclassicism to expose how ridiculous French society was. His masterpiece, Tartuffe, was about a religious hypocrite, and it caused an unbelievable scandal. The church was furious and tried to get it banned, saying he was attacking religion. Molière's response was just perfect. He basically said, "I'm not attacking faith, I'm attacking the con artists who hide behind it."
Molière's commitment to theater was, no exaggeration, total. He lived and died on the stage. In one of the most famous stories in theater history, he was starring in his own play, The Imaginary Invalid, playing a hypochondriac of all things, when he had a coughing fit and collapsed from a real hemorrhage. They carried him off stage, and he died just a few hours later. He gave everything to his art.
Now, an art form this grand, this ordered, this expensive, needed a patron to match, and boy did it get one. The ultimate patron, King Louis XIV, the Sun King himself.
You see, for Louis XIV, theater wasn't just a fun evening out. It was a tool. It was a reflection of his own power, of the glory and order of France. It was basically cultural propaganda to show the rest of the world how sophisticated and dominant his nation was. So he poured an insane amount of money into it.
And you can literally see this transformation when you look at the theaters themselves. On the left, you've got the old style, like the Hôtel de Bourgogne. It's basically just a long, narrow tennis court with a platform at one end. Kind of medieval. But on the right, that's the new style, like the Palais Cardinal. It's a total revolution. It has the first proscenium arch in France, that picture frame around the stage, plus tiered seating and space for amazing scenery. It was built for spectacle.
So how did they pull off these incredible stage effects? It all came down to some super clever Italian technology. First, that proscenium arch, which focused everyone's attention. Second, they used beautifully painted scenery that created this stunning illusion of depth. And the coolest part was the pole and chariot system. It was this complex machinery under the stage that let them change massive scenic panels in seconds. For the audience, it looked like pure magic. All right, so all the pieces are on the board. We've got the rules, the star playwrights, the royal money, and the cool tech. Now they're all about to get fused together to create something totally new, something that had never existed before in the world.
The final step was a power move by the king. After Molière died in 1673, Louis didn't want his favorite acting troupe to just fall apart. So he ordered them to merge with their biggest rival. Then, in 1680, he did it again, forcing the last two major French-speaking companies in Paris to become one single super company.
And that brings us to this one single game-changing year, 1680. This is the moment where that whole journey from chaos to order finally becomes permanent.
And the result of that final merger? The Comédie Française. The king gave it a monopoly on all spoken French plays in Paris. It was funded by the state, controlled by the state, and its purpose was to represent the state. It was, effectively, the first national theater in the world.
And that is the lasting legacy of this whole era. This idea that a government should fund a flagship arts institution to preserve and promote its culture, that model was copied all over the globe. It all started right here.
It's an incredible story, isn't it? Art forged by power, chaos turned into order. But it does leave us with a pretty big question to think about. When a government gets this involved in creating and shaping art, who is that art really for? Who does it truly serve?